ladies and gentlemen. I have the pleasure to be with Kesenya again. From time to time, we're meeting to discuss major astronomical, astrological events which always impact our reality. And we usually do this from the perspective of the modern astrology, modern tropical, which Ksenia combines with Vedic, and also the Babylonian sidereal astrology. We also speak about, Ksenia is in Australia, so we combine also this. It is interesting because I cannot speak a lot for Australia, Ksenia, so you do also this part, and we combine different parts of the world in our analysis. Thank you for accepting my invitation.
I'm always excited when I get an invitation from you, Krasi, because I love our conversations and I just love connecting with you. So it's my pleasure.
Me too. Me too. And I like I told you, people were revisiting our old talk. So I said, I have to invite you already. It's time. So yes, so we decided to speak about this major, very important Jupiter-Saturn square, which is part of a cycle. So we cannot isolate this only as the square which is taking place right now as we speak, square between Jupiter and Saturn. But we need to speak about the whole cycle, which is also actually involving other aspects, which we also need to mention as a whole picture. So, Ksenia, you start maybe. You've done some interesting historical research on the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction.
Yeah, just a
yes,
little.
we started.
You're so right, Krasi. You can't just look at the Jupiter-Saturn square alone and say, "Oh, it's this." It's part of something that is at play over a whole 20 years. I mean, this cycle we're in now started in 2020 with the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn at 0 degrees of Aquarius. Back in on the solstice in December 2020. I remember going outside. It was No, it wasn't solstice. It was the 24th of December that it became exact. And I remember going outside with my family to look at Christmas time here in Australia, to actually see it together in the evening sky. And it was very, very beautiful and strong and powerful. And my family, who are not into astrology, were like, "Oh, yeah." And I'm like, "Don't you realize how special this is? This is the start of a whole new era, 20 years cycle." But that initial conjunction, maybe we can start by talking about that initial conjunction, because it was...
We have to.
Yeah. It was incredibly special because it marks the beginning, and all astrologers were talking about this at the time, of a move into air signs. So 200 years of Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions are going to occur from now on where they conjunct in air signs every time. And so that's really, really significant. We're moving into a whole new modality with these conjunctions that happen cyclically every 20 years. We did have a conjunction in an air sign back in the early 80s, sort of 1982, I think it was, Saturn and Jupiter in Libra. And it's very interesting to look at that one, because that ushered in neoliberalism, which we are now seeing the destruction of. So that one was a bit of an anomaly. And often at the end of that 200-year cycle, which had been in earth signs, at the end of that 200-year cycle, you'll often get what you might describe as a hop out of kin, where one will just randomly be in the next modality. And then it goes back to what it was before for one or two conjunctions, and then you're fully into the new modality, which in this case is air. So that happened back in 82, and this is in the tropical astrology. And to my mind, it's very interesting because the 80s, my husband and I just recently watched the terrible movie Wall Street about how greedy the world became in the 80s, how mercenary, how financially corrupt things became thanks to neoliberalism in the 80s. And, that outplay of this greedy financial consumption of companies at the expense of nations, at the expense of people, really got going. I mean, there's plenty of things playing into it prior to that, but it really became obvious in the
Yeah.
80s after that conjunction. And what are we dealing with now in this first phase of the next conjunction in air signs is the collapse of empires that had grown fat on neoliberalist behaviors. So, it's so interesting. You've got to understand history to understand where you're at and why things play out the way they do. But yes, so we're now in a 200-year cycle of conjunctions in air signs. And so this whole first process, this 20-year process that we're in from 2020 to 2040, is about setting up this new dynamic, this new air sign. What's it going to look like? What's the new structure? What's the new, way of doing things on the earth? When we go back to the previous, sorry if I'm talking too much, but when we go back to the
No.
previous set of conjunctions that began around the time of the Industrial Revolution in Earth signs, what happened then on the planet? Well, we had the Industrial Revolution and everything became industrialized and all about infrastructure and, all that kind of financial growth, earth-based kind of energy that began when we
Yes.
had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions beginning in Earth signs. I think, golly, now I'm going from memory, might have been late 1700s, early 1800s that occurred. And then we had 200 years of that, the Industrial Revolution. And now we're in a whole new phase. This isn't the Industrial Revolution anymore. We're in the air sign Jupiter-Saturn grand conjunction cycle. And what will that bring us? I'll hand it back to you
Yes.
after I've talked your ear off there, Krasi.
Yes. Thank you. Ksenia, I agree with you absolutely with what you just said. I also want to add that this conjunction is always about money, always about finances, without exception. Every next aspect between the two, like it will be followed, of course, now it is followed by the square. Later on, it will be followed by the trine and then the opposition and so on. It is always about some financial changes on Earth. When the two met, we need to also remember that at the very same moment, we had the conjunction between Saturn and Pluto, and they both played out this scenario also, which you just explained, about the destruction of the current social system, the governments, and you see it. And these things are not happening overnight. These are cycles which have impact for the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction will have impact for the next 20 years. The Saturn-Pluto conjunction, minimum 35 years ahead. So we're talking about very serious cycles. But the beginning of every cycle shows how the whole cycle will look like. And you mentioned this was very exceptional. People were watching this because they made this exceptional so-called Bethlehem star as if because they would look as if they're one star.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether this is the Bethlehem star really, which, but 800 years ago, we had the same thing. And then, in Bethlehem with the Jesus Christ time, I'm not sure whether this is the one which was the omen bringing, the Christ energy. I'm not really sure. I doubt it a little bit, but it has very good energy in any case. And it is energy of awakening.
Yeah.
So you saw destruction of the system starting, and it's playing out now as we speak very, very much, very strongly. And it coincides with amazing awakening because of the significance of this one star, the Bethlehem star, as if...
It's really like, for those who don't know, the sort of, I guess, the foundations of astrology, like the inner planets, you've got the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus. They're very personal to our personal journey and so on. And then you've got Mars, which is kind of a bridging planet, actually, between the personal, and then you've got Jupiter and Saturn, which are the visible planets that correspond to the collective. So when these two, form their cycle, they're very much, as you've just said, about finances, yes, but also about like what's happening in the collective structures on Earth, and they affect us personally. But they're also, like we've just described, about these collective movements that are happening. So yeah, It's interesting times that we're in, and we're currently, as we're recording this, in a state of being in the final Jupiter-Saturn square, 90-degree aspect, which is the opening square. And I'm just thankful that that phase is in its last legs, if you know what I mean. It's had its last interaction, its last aspect on the 15th of June or thereabouts. So that's a relief. But yeah, so this, as you've just said, Krasi, this cycle is about setting up a new financial parameters, and with Pluto, the social structures as well that are new. And we're seeing it just so, in some cases, very horrifically playing out on the planet right now. And it's hard in that Jupiter-Saturn square cycle to keep your optimism, to keep your buoyancy, to keep your hope when you look around and feel like the world's gone mad, you know? I don't know how you're feeling in Bulgaria, but that's certainly how
In
Australians are
Europe,
feeling.
it is unbelievable. Many factors play together in this, this conjunction is happening also at the moment when we also have Neptune, Saturn, the square between Jupiter and Saturn, then you had Neptune, Saturn conjunction, almost conjunction, also in July to be exact conjunction. But in any case, it is happening in the 7 degrees of sidereal coordinates. And by the way, the most important detail is that Jupiter, who is also in the 7 degree of Gemini, sidereal Gemini, is invisible. And this is a very serious detail because you would have 7 degree Saturn with Neptune in Pisces, and Jupiter, who is the significator, who is ruling ruling Pisces, where Saturn is, is invisible. So it's a very, very actually even difficult to analyze because we have a big dose of invisibility, secrecy, and clarity with the invisible Jupiter. Jupiter is benevolent planet, as we all know. He's a good planet. He gives abundance. He keeps signifying children, abundance, beautiful things, moral spirituality. Jupiter is only good. And we believe in the ancient, the ancient Babylonians would believe when planet becomes invisible, from our side, because it's there, but we don't see the planet because it's hidden in the rays of the sun. This energy we're lacking, we're missing. And we're missing the energy of abundance, high morals. You will see a lot of immoral actions, for example, of rulers, because Saturn is representing, on the other hand, the rulers. So basically, we see conflict between the morals, and the this root Saturnine energy, or left alone without the softening effect of Jupiter. So that's why we live in these times where financially everyone is complaining to struggle, everyone, because you don't have the abundance, the help of Jupiter. He's invisible. Venus is fallen in Aries in the very same moment. She's also not there to help us. We have to wait until end of June, until at least she's entering Taurus to give us help in hand. It's really such situation when this aspect is heavy because of the lack of the energies of the benevolent planets. They're just not there to help us. We're left alone with difficult planets. You see, this is how I see the situation. That's why this financial crisis is serious financial crisis, totally crisis for the markets. You see, this is how I see the square taking place. And when we know that the two planets, when they are together, starting a cycle, being in a square later on, the trine will be, of course, more benevolent later on. Excuse me. But when you see them in this configuration, it's always financial and it's always difficult.
Yeah, but you know what? That explains everything to me, and I'm like, of course, it's all in the heavens. It always is. But I'm encouraged because in Vedic astrology, they have something called planetary war. And when these
Yeah.
two, Saturn and Jupiter, made their conjunction back in 2020, Jupiter was the winner of the planetary war in that circumstance. So, to my mind, the outcome of this 20-year period, even though there's these hard, difficult times within this 20-year cycle, the outcome is going to be victorious with Jupiter as the winner of the planetary war. Like the good things of Jupiter will come to bear, I think, upon the Earth. But we've got to wait till 2040 to probably see the fruit of that winning of the planetary war there with Jupiter and
It will be
Saturn.
winning. It will be winning because it started as something very beautiful. It was they were like one shining, magnificent star. It will be good,
Yeah.
no doubt about this. But it will be another how many years? Like how many until 2040
Yes.
when they like close the cycle and to be reborn again with the new cycle.
Mm.
We will be having serious impact. Yes, let's not forget the awakening. It started with them. It's like
Mhm.
it was like a sparkle, it was like you see so many people after this conjunction were even people that you would never imagine to be awakening.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Absolutely. Here,
Even
he wants to get in on the act. Here in Australia, I mean, we went through what has been touted as the most horrific lockdowns during the COVID years.
oh, I remember Australia was known for that.
I mean, and when you look at the chart of Australia, which we've talked about on your channel before, like everyone thinks, oh yeah, Australians easygoing, happy-go-lucky, blah blah blah. But we've got Saturn Sun in the 10th house. It's terrible. Like there is this controlling energy that is there that we kind of half pretend doesn't exist half the time. But now people are awake to it since that. We fully know, our government, can you really trust them? Probably not. That.
Not probably. Forget the probably.
That's right. That's right. But prior to that, people were like, oh, yeah, the government, no, just do what I'm told. Now people know, and it needed to happen. It needed to happen that occurred. What interests me with that conjunction was that it occurred, and I think I might have talked about this in the past with you, Krasi. It occurred in tropical astrology on the rising degree of China's chart. And so I think
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, the country that is going to come out of this 20-year period as the superior, I mean, we can see it. Like they're the new empire. It's China. As the old empire of the West goes through its destructive falling down phase, China will be the one to step up. So, the astrology doesn't lie. And I think, we're a quarter of the way through this overall 20-year cycle. And you can already see the herald of these sorts of things that was spoken about in the charts at the conjunction.
Yes, but Ksenia, what you think also, I was speaking about this yesterday on my channel, 2 videos about the Saturn, who also participates in the Saturn-Neptune conjunction at the very same moment. And this is happening right on the ascendant of Iran, conjoining their
Really?
Mars,
Oh,
conjoining their Mars. And also you see what this war started exactly when Mars, you see, entered sidereal Leo, but with Saturn and Neptune right on the conjoining Mars on their ascendant. So this is like by the book trouble, by the book.
yep. I had a
Um,
medium predict for me, gosh, must have been in 2018, 2019. No, it was after that. It was around 2021. So I'd had a few readings with this psychic medium who said, channeled something that came through saying if the world can avoid war up until 2026, then the raising consciousness will be profound and there'll be a real stepping up of humanity. But they were like, if you can manage to get there by 2026. And I'm like, come on, humanity, we're so close to getting there. But it doesn't look likely. I mean, I've just done a video for my channel on the new moon in Cancer that's coming up, and that new moon conjunct invisible Jupiter is going to form in Western astrology what's called a yod shape with Mars and with Pluto.
yes,
So, a yod with Mars and pointing the finger at Pluto. Oh my gosh, and following on from what you've just said about the chart of Iran and conjunct with Mars, like it's it doesn't
it's like a
seem
bad
likely that
omen.
humanity will be
Yeah.
able to get through to 2026 unless they're at a very high state of consciousness.
No, the wars are orchestrated just exactly not to allow people to feel, to have free spirits and awaken further. You know, this is wars also always happen when there will be a change in the social system. So it doesn't happen without wars. This is how this matrix is made. I believe because of the levels of our consciousness, we are not all awake yet. Still, we need wars in order to, not we, but the matrix needs wars in order to bring these changes in the social system, which actually can happen naturally, but it is not happening yet. That's why I've been repeating this, and I'm sorry if I repeat it all the time, but it is each one of us really we need to be we're responsible for the way we think, because it is a collective thought form, collective thought process. And when we are not in the low vibrations of these planets, you know, for example, you mentioned yourself, the planets with the higher hierarchies, like Saturn, you know, above Saturn, Neptune, Pluto, Uranus, which are so much responsible for the changes on Earth. They all of them have their low vibrational aspects and the high vibrational aspects, and this is so important to repeat every time, because if you, for example, take Pluto, Pluto is connected to the divine truth, and he can be actually very good planet, believe it or not. Pluto can be amazing. He's ruling the life under the surface of the ground. You know, he's ruling the roots. He's ruling the seeds. Is this bad? No, his depth, his, yes, transformation, like we say, but he is not bad if we connect with these energies, not with the energies of lies, fears, deception, and whatnot. So it's really very important how we connect with these energies, because it's simply energies, which we transform into events with our thought forms.
I've been doing a series for my my astrology course on Vedic astrology, and one of their theories is that because we're in the Kali Yuga, we're manifesting the planetary energies at the lowest vibrational level.
Exactly.
But as we move out of the Kali Yuga, we're going to start manifesting at these high levels, and that's what this process really is all about: is moving more into the age of Aquarius, more out of the Kali Yuga into the higher consciousness, and manifesting that Pluto's energy and Mars's energy and all at much more beneficial levels, which they do have that potential to do. Yeah, so it's interesting times, that's for sure. In the tropical astrology, we've just had the square of Saturn and Jupiter occur, firstly at 17 degrees of Gemini and Pisces, and then the second conjunction, which was on solstice or around Christmas solstice time, in Gemini and Pisces at 14 degrees. And now this square has occurred on the 15th of June, Cancer Aries axis. So we've moved out of those mutable energies with this square into cardinal, which has brought, I think, a different flavor to these squares that have been forming since August last year. You know, I mean, both cardinal and mutable are all about change and about, you know, moving from one energy, like type of season, if you like, into another. They're not fixed. They're not keeping the status quo. They're both about change. But they're different kinds of change. And I think this one that's involved Aries in the tropical, in the square aspect, has been a really difficult one for avoiding, like we're talking about avoiding war. I just think that Aries involvement hasn't really helped very much.
No, wouldn't help indeed. Also, the fact that Saturn and Neptune are conjoining in the same moment is also very revolutionary, because historically, when you look back, you see, and I'm sure you're always doing historical research like I do, you know, they always give historical events, and you cannot isolate Saturn-Neptune conjunction from Saturn-Jupiter square because they are together, especially with Jupiter
Tell me,
invisible.
Krasi, I'm interested in your perspective on Saturn Neptune because it's always associated with communism, but
I know.
And you grew up in a communist
Communism.
country, which I did not. So I'm interested in how you feel that connection plays out in society, the Saturn Neptune from that, because look, Neptune was discovered when it was conjunct with Saturn from memory, and around the time of Marx writing, or within a few years of Marx writing his Communist Manifesto. So Neptune has always actually been linked, I think, with this communist ideal, because it was discovered in a conjunction with Saturn at the time. So yeah, I don't know if you can speak to that.
I tell you what I think, Kesenya, they had another conjunction after the discovery of the communism, and this didn't bring necessarily another social system. You know, the communism was there for many, many years after the discovery until 1990,
1998 was
89, and 1989, 89, and in 1989, and then we had. How many years is this ago? 1935?
Yeah, roughly that.
So see, another conjunction, and then the communism was gone. Interesting. But always when this conjunction would happen, there would be a revolution. You know, you had, I keep repeating this, you know, the English-Egyptian war. You had Berlin Wall associated with communism, which fell. You had
Abraham Lincoln had the conjunction of Neptune, Saturn in his chart, and, you know, revolutionary leader.
Revolutionary. Also, you had opium wars and stuff, but also you had Russian Revolution when that same conjunction happened. So it is not necessarily bringing communism back, of course, since it was destroyed in 19. But new social system, yes, and also true revolutions, because, like we said, you need wars and revolution to change the matrix, to have new social systems. And unfortunately, you know why I say unfortunately, well, when you look back, and when you follow up the Saturn-Pluto, especially conjunction in all these major new cycles, there was this thing which was called the difficult 16 centuries, when when you had really decay of the social systems. And I followed, you know, the lecture of amazing historian, Russian. His name is Andrei Fursev. And when I was following his lecture, I was also immediately checking the astrological events.
Yes, I did.
And you do the same, yeah. And, you know, I was just listening to event he would mention, then I would immediately check astronomically back in history. And I tell you, we're heading towards difficult centuries, like total decay of economies. Yes.
So what years was he referring to in his lecture?
He would call this the... I forgot exactly because I did this 6-7 months ago. I forgot exactly how he would call it was the I think difficult 16th centuries.
So the 16th century, not 16 centuries of difficulty.
16th centuries, yes.
Right.
Total decay of life in Western civilizations. Western.
So why the Western? What is it that triggers that, you know, destruction of Western culture?
If you see the horoscopes of European Union, for example, if you see the horoscope of America, look what is happening. They have a Pluto return. If this is not significant, if this is not total change of their structure, because Pluto return. I mean, I cannot stress this enough, Ksenia.
Yeah, one of the great astrologers that I followed who passed away last year, Rick De Clemente, always said that the Pluto return is like, you've lived through your teenagerhood, now you've got to grow up. Now you've got to mature and act like an adult. Are you going to grow up, or are you going to live in perpetual, teenagerhood and suffer the consequences? And I liked that sort of imagery, well, America, are you going to grow up and start acting like an adult, or are you going to be the bully in the playground forever? So I don't know if I should have said that. Sorry. I'm married to an American. It's okay.
Yes, yes. No, no. Yeah, it's of course it's okay. People are awake. Come on, people know. But I mean,
I
yes,
love
if you see.
America. But their leadership needs a good boot in the backside. They're terrible. All of them.
Yes, so this is
Not one party or another, the whole bang lot. They're terrible. So are Australians. So, in fact, that leads me to another question, Krasi. Like, the leadership everywhere in the world right now is horrendous. How have we ended up with such, terribly manipulated, easily bribed leadership everywhere in the West? It's to me,
I
it's
tell you
unfathomable.
what I think. In back in it was not far ago, in 2014, we changed the cycles, the mini eras, because the astronomical cycles, the Babylonian cycles, are the major 25,000 year cycle. We're under the rulership of Pisces. We're not yet in the era of Aquarius. We're heading there. That's why we feel the Aquarius energy. But in 2014, we changed the mini era, the sub era of Pisces, and we entered era of Aries. This is Mars. And Mars now doesn't, like we both just mentioned, Mars wouldn't really, these are not the high vibrational energies of Mars. They're very low because of the level of consciousness. And that's why we entered mini era of wars, more wars. This happened in 2014. And this happened when we still had the Islamic State created by, the services, and was destroying the artifacts, the beautiful Iraq, the former Babylon. So this coincided automatically with the change of the mini era, entering era of Aries, abandoning the era of Taurus, which was much more Venus-like. And you can immediately think of events. And so we entered this mini era of Aries, and we are perceiving the low vibrational aspects of Mars, the collective. This is why when we are vibrating low, the rulers will also be fitting our vibrational levels, because what you vibrate, this is what you meet. So these people, again, the same amazing Russian historian was saying, we now have rulers which at school would have an F or an E, or I don't know, I'm quite, yeah, literally this is the level. See the way they speak, their speech, the way they do. These are illiterate people. But this is because of the low martial energies, which we unfortunately tune into. If we vibrate higher, we'll be immediately receiving the higher level of rulers. And now they're really terrible. They're not dignified. They have no dignity.
No, they're embarrassing. They're so stupid. They're embarrassing.
Yep. Embarrassing.
Yeah, our Australian Prime Minister is just, oh my gosh, where do I start?
Oh, you have to see here. Yeah.
But how long does this particular era last for? You've talked about the era of Taurus moving into the era of Aries.
Better don't ask. Better don't ask.
Oh no.
Because we're talking about 2.5 degrees of dodecatemoria, this section of the, and each degree, Kesenya, 78 years, times 2.5.
Right. Oh, okay. So it's like the precession of the equinoxes then?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So that's from the sidereal perspective then, that we're moving into the age of Aries.
And it is backwards because we have about
Yeah.
4 degrees more in order to leave completely Pisces. But these are roughly count 5 degrees times 78. How many years before? But we're speaking about major cycles.
Yeah.
From this universal perspective, this is nothing. That's why we already feel very much the Aquarius, the Uranus energy. And you know, even I mentioned Uranus. You know, people on my channel were blaming me. Why you speaking that you apply Babylonian astrology and you speak about Uranus, Neptune, Pluto? Yes, but we live in these times. You cannot. You know, for many years, Kesenya, I was avoiding them. I was thinking, no, the Babylonians didn't apply Uranus, Neptune, and then I was missing something. And in 2017, when Uranus entered Sidereal Aries, I even had dreams about him, and I said, I cannot. Everything is saying they are there. It's really bad to avoid them.
Yes.
So
well, the consciousness of humanity was at a level of awareness in 1700, whatever, to discover Uranus, you know. So we have to incorporate them because the consciousness of humanity is at that state. Whereas back in ancient Babylon, not that they were incredibly smart and everything, but the level of general consciousness wasn't enough to.
It's different. Exactly.
We don't think they knew about them. Maybe they did know about them, and all that information.
I think they knew.
They knew. Yeah.
They knew. It was indeed, like you said, the level of consciousness. They had different pluses at that time, you know, different. But anyway, this is so we are seeing the Uranus-like events all the time. You see the artificial intelligence, you know, this are again low vibrational aspects of Uranus can be amazing level of consciousness without the need of artificial intelligence, for God's sake. You don't need it when you are yourself talented for all these things, you know. But anyway, this is the fact. And again, let's not forget we're in Mars Aries time period.
Speaking of these outer planets, do you think the fact that they're all in a bisextile formation or a minor grand trine formation at the moment is encouraging for humanity, given what we're going through on the Earth right now? Like these are the celestial planets, the angelic planets holding space.
I see it as a blessing. Yeah. Good that you mentioned this. I totally forgot about it. I see this as a blessing. This is harmonious aspect between them. I see this as a blessing. It's like they're there. This is help. This is help from the universe. This is how I see it. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So
it's like you know, I look at this sometimes like this is a scene. It's a theater, and the universe is there sitting and watching how we do.
I know. Very cruel of them to sit there and watch all of this playing out. But no, I am encouraged by that myself because they are celestial, they are angelic, like the divine, the other realms are watching over what happens on the planet right now, for sure.
And you know, just sorry interrupting you, but this is interesting in relation to what you just said, because I have a very clairvoyant friend, and she would see really the spirits and the helpers. She would see them, but then she's saying to them, and that's why we have to pray, because they help if we really ask. Sometimes they sit and only watch. That's why prayer is so important. So she's saying, you arrogant, you sit and watch and you're not helping me. You know, she would address that. She said, what is this? Sometimes you're very arrogant just to enjoy the scene, but not interfering. So we have to pray.
Yes.
Yes, we have to, really.
That's right. I wanted to ask I was thinking earlier, I wanted to ask, what can we do to work best with these energies? And is there anything better than to raise our vibration, to meet with these celestial beings in such a way, to ask of their benevolence to interfere?
Yes, Ksenia, you know what I think? There is only one capital that we keep till we go to the next incarnations or next lifetimes or whatever. It is the good we do. Everything else doesn't really matter. It's the good we do. And this was confirmed for me personally from, I was following the work of this amazing Brazilian medium, Chico Xavier. He's very famous. And there is a movie called The House. I think The House, which has a translation in English. I think it's The House. I saw it with translation, not bad actually. It was a good translation in Bulgarian, but the movie exists in English. It's called The House. It's based on his experience. He's a medium, the Brazilian medium, amazing medium, who literally would see what is happening in the afterlife, so to say. And there you understand that the only capital you carry forever is the good you do. Nothing else. Really, even not the knowledge so much. It's the good you do. Because you see so many people which are not spiritual, they do good and they're well. Yeah. And they're not spiritual. They will say, oh, I don't know. But they do good.
Yeah.
And then they get back good. So it doesn't matter your knowledge, your belief system, religious or not, or spirituality. Really, this is what matters.
Yes. Yes, I love it. I love it. And in these times more than ever, we need to be doing what is good and gracious and kind and loving everywhere.
Yes. Because this is what they try to destroy.
That's
Notice.
It.
Notice. Exactly, this is what they try to destroy. Remember when there was the pandemic and they would say you need distance to 1.5 meters. You know why? Because the heart, the aura which the heart is creating is 1.5 meters. They were afraid that of the connection with the human heart.
Oh my God!
Because when we have distance about more than 1.5 meters, our hearts are not touching the auras of our hearts. The heart is making such, aura circle around us, energetic. And when we are not connecting our hearts, there is no good between us. There is no love and good. So that's why they were so concerned with our love, with the good that we do to each other. And this is exactly what we have to do. The way to fight matrix is doing good to each other.
I'm just so glad I never paid attention to that BS.
Of course not. Forget it. I was not even wearing a mask. They called the police for me in the supermarket because I said, I don't want to be rude now. What I said, yeah.
I love you, Krasi. That's fantastic. Well, just talking about this, I'm now intrigued. We're talking about the good deeds. That's what we carry with us into the next incarnation.
Yes.
That in Vedic astrology, I don't know if Babylonian is the same, but Jupiter is the planet of good karma from our past lives. And Saturn is the planet of not bad karma, but just our repercussions, karmic repercussions, the Lord of karma. So I'm just curious, as we're talking about this cycle of Jupiter, Saturn moving with one another, we're at the opening square. Next is coming up the trine, which I'm looking forward to. That's happening on the 31st of August 2026, the 3rd of April 2027, and I've got the other date here, 11th of July 2027. I can't wait. I've got them on my calendar. That's yay. But this cycle is very karmic. Because of, the two lords of karma, one good karma, one of our karmic just desserts, so to speak. How do you see that in Babylonian in terms of karmic repercussions from this cycle?
I see everything as karma, Kesenya. The horoscope, every planet, the way Venus, Mars, Jupiter, the way they're situated in your horoscope, this is what you cooked in your past lifetime and you're eating it now. And now you're cooking your next one. Yeah. So that's why it's very important how we do now, because so I see literally everything as karma, one more than another. Yes, Saturn, they call it, of course, he's the Lord of Karma. He's called officially so. You're right. Of course, simply, maybe this is too simple to say, but of course the good aspects between Jupiter and Saturn will give good. And later the good aspect that you mentioned, of course, will give a little bit more financial relief, because now this is financially very intense. For there is no one who wouldn't say I'm suffering financially now, because this is money, and it's hard on the finances. Immediately you see this. That's why the conjunction is called royal conjunction, because when they're in conjunction, they give good financial results. And we witnessed that when they conjoined. Financially, it was easier. Markets were better. Everything was different.
One of my Vedic teachers taught me that the square aspect rarely gives long-lasting problems. So they are temporary, you know, not even hiccups, difficulties, stresses, tensions, but they don't necessarily come in permanently forever. And that was really helpful for me to keep in mind, that this process is not permanent.
It is. I agree. I agree. This is so. Indeed. Indeed. This is so.
But do you think also in the karmic idea of these two that it's societal karma rather than personal? Because in the personal, you're right, in our personal chart, we're carrying our past life energy and we're moving into our next life's energy, whatever that might look like. But in the collective, when we go through these Saturn Jupiter cycles, we're getting the, you know, repercussions of what's gone on before. I mean, like I said earlier, with this, the previous conjunction of these two in an air sign in tropical astrology set up neoliberalism that now we're getting the karmic outworkings of, as all these, you know, financial structures start to collapse and fall in on themselves because they're non-sustainable the way they were set up back in the 80s. And that's karmic to my mind. That is the repercussion.
Yes, of course, exactly. But you see it yourself, the impact on the markets, which concern every one of us, the economies of the whole world. Of course, the higher the vibration, the more impact on the collective of the planets, the higher the position. The celestial spheres, as you know them, the higher you go, the more impact on the collective. Of course, you're very right.
Yeah. True.
That's why you see when you have, let's say, a certain position of Pluto, you know it's for the whole generation, or a position of Neptune or Uranus, it's about the whole generation. They experience similar events because it is very, like you say, generational for the collective. True. And this is good to understand and to realize that we are part of collective.
Yeah.
That's why it is a collective. You feel it or not, the energy at least is collective. If my neighbor is there and I don't communicate with him, at least we exchange energies. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's
right?
it. That's it. And I get a lot of, I don't know, you probably get this too, a lot of people asking me, you know, my chart says this, that, and the other, but this hasn't happened for me when I live in this country. I mean, we interact as we're energetic beings, and we're interacting with the energy of the country's chart that we live in, you know, and it's all tied in together, the people we interact with, like you've just described with your neighbor, you know, you might have nothing to do with them, but it's still there.
Enormous. You know, I watched something which I love. I will never forget, Kesenya. One lady was making a very beautiful drawing, and he was saying, let's say you lie to somebody. He is in front of you, you lie to him, and he believes you. His energy, his consciousness knows that you lied. And at a certain moment, this will have result. This will give result on different levels of the reality. So he doesn't know on the physical realm, but there, energetically, his other spirit bodies know.
Of course. That's just so true. Yep, that's so true. Yep. So interesting, Krasi.
Yeah, very nice talking to you always, Kesenya.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
I mean, we have, I don't know, I'm excited to see what this cycle brings about, because I think we needed change. I think that there had been a lot of the underhanded bullshit that we've been seeing on the planet in clarity now has been going on for years and years, like way back to the assassination of Lincoln in America, and then the bringing in of the Federal Reserve, and I mean, I could go on and on. And all the corruption in Australia here, undermining things. We had, golly, where do I start? We had a prime minister trying to bring in secession from the banking empires here in Australia in the 70s, and they kicked him out of Parliament instead of letting him remain. We had one politician who was assassinated, went swimming, drowned, you know, all these sort of stuff that's been going on for years, but now it's in the light. And I think this, well, I forget where I was going with this, but I think it was necessary that, that we woke up to a lot of this stuff so that it won't happen again, so that we don't, once we've restructured everything, maybe through this cycle, maybe it might take a couple more cycles, but we're hopefully setting up something better. Because I know what you've just said about us moving into this era of Aries, but I keep coming back, and it's the one thing that gives me hope, Krasi. We are moving out of the Kali Yuga, according to the teachings from Shura Yukteswar that I have.
No, that's, I know,
And so things are slowly, I feel, getting better. And I saw this thing on TikTok the other day that I really thought was great, actually. This guy was describing the various empires that there have been in the last 1,000 years or so, the Belgians in the Congo, and how absolutely horrific they treated the people of the Congo, and abusively and foul. And then he talked about, then we moved into sort of the era of the Spanish, and what the terrible decimation they brought in South America, and so on and so on, how awful that was. But it was, in some, I think this was the order he had it in, it was better in some ways than what had been done in the Congo. Like, it wasn't quite as bad as what had happened in the Congo. And I might have those two back to front and in the wrong order, so forgive me. I haven't researched the dates on this one. But then we moved into the British Empire taking over things, and like, I'm from a Commonwealth country, and we did like the British Empire did horrific things in all the Commonwealth countries, but wasn't quite as bad as what the Spanish did in South America. And then the American Empire, which is now, I think, reaching the end of its 200-year dominance, that has not been, it's been awful, but not quite as bad as what the British Empire was. So the point being of this particular TikTok that I looked at was that it's getting progressively better. And as we move into China are now building roads and bridges and things like that in African nations that have been decimated by British colonialism. And, it appears, I'll say this just to hedge my bets, it appears that the impact of the various empires is getting less and less terrible each time. I mean, there's still empires, and I would love to get rid of imperialism altogether. But to me, when I heard that analysis, and I felt like it really resonated, I was like, that is this cycle of the ages in its very long form, slow process of improvement, bit by bit by bit, as we head back towards the golden age. And so whatever comes next, I mean, it's not going to be much in my lifetime, but it might hopefully get us back to or move us into a new empire that's just a little bit better than where we've come from. And then in 200 years, because empires usually last about 200 years in the analysis I've just given, then we might move into just a slightly better one, and a slightly better one, and a slightly better, so that we get eventually back to a much better age and a much better state of being on the planet. That was a very long-winded explanation of it.
No.
And I saw that probably took 2 minutes.
No, it's a good one, and I hope so. I hope with you, Kesenya. But you know what is the thing is, when you have completion of such major era, like the 25,000-year cycle of Pisces, you can imagine, when there is a completion of era which lasts 2,500 years, which is the mini era, Pisces, and we are, the spring, the equinox, spring, for you is not spring, but the equinox is is still in Pisces. When we have completion of 2,000 years cycle, the last days could be 300-400 years, are always difficult. They're always difficult, and then you go back to Babylon, to Sumer, go to Egypt. The last days, the last 100 years were very hard, and they were like, people really paying the karma back then when you're completing such mini era of 2,000 years. It's a mini era. When you're completing this, when you have the last dodecatemoria, the last one of the cycle, it's always time of payment. That's why unfortunately, we might be heading towards difficult 16th centuries, Not 16. Yes, I misled you with this, with my English. Sorry, but you
We
know what I mean. It's
clarified that,
another.
don't worry.
Yeah, yeah. But first, I will shock them a little bit. So it is. But you know what I mean. Last, it's really payment day a little bit. That's why this, like you say, these countries, these empires are paying now the karma, and unfortunately, people who have nothing to do with that are paying with them.
Exactly. That's you've hit the nail on the head. That's how I feel. I'm like, hang on, I had nothing to do
Yes.
with the invasion of Australia. Why am I, why is this happening?
Yes, but your ancestors maybe did. Maybe they lived in that times. We don't know. We don't really remember that far, unfortunately. We don't know.
Well,
So we paying with them.
yeah, mine was sent out here as convicts. They probably stole a loaf of bread in England or something terrible like that. Heaven forbid.
We chose these times, Ksenia. You chose your Australia. I chose
That's it.
Europe. We chose it, and for very specific reasons.
It's so important to remember that, isn't it? Because when we're like, why am I going to this? Like, this is what the soul needed to experience. And the bigger picture is the growth of the soul and the process of the
Exactly.
soul.
The only picture. The only.
That's it. That's it. So how do you see this the square of Jupiter and Saturn and maybe progressing into the trine of Jupiter and Saturn sort of playing out at the moment in Europe? Because we're all very over here in Australia.
Major financial crisis, major. There will be relief in 1 year, let's say after the summer of 2026. But 2025 until next summer will be very critical, especially financially. And you see with these wars, they're indeed destroying also the markets, the financial systems. So this is how I see it.
Yeah.
And invisible planets. You don't know what is happening behind the curtains. You don't know what they're cooking.
Yeah.
Saturn in Pisces, he can be so unclear there. You can imagine. You can imagine. Normally, Saturn is not connected with any unclarities, but in Pisces, you can, yes, this can, of course, eventually bring new really spiritual leaders who will influence for good the collective. You can have with Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. This is absolutely a must, and this will happen. You will see also new philosophical, but this also can mean hit on Christianity. And you see it, by the way. You see how they is destroyed in Syria, the Christian communities, very sadly. They're really killing them. In Egypt too, in China.
Throughout Africa too, I understand as well.
Yes. And this is also, but also maybe they need new energy, revival, of the true Christian essence, this sparkle, which is not religious. It's not absolutely, it has nothing to do with religion.
Yes. No, you're right. Well, it's interesting. Australia has Aries rising in its chart from 1901 when we became I forgot, we became a nation. Not when Captain Cook landed here, but we became a nation in 1901. There's two charts for Australia, and I'm talking about the more recent one. And we have Aries rising, and of course, in the tropical chart, Saturn and Neptune have just moved there into there. So we've got a couple of years of significant upheaval for the people, I think, because the first house of a country's chart represents the people and the nation. So yeah,
Yes.
interesting times. And a girlfriend sent me this morning an article about how now one of our states in Australia is a state called South Australia, how they've pushed through a bill, some legislation that allows the government to compulsorily acquire private land. So if you've got a secondary house, a holiday house or something, and the government decides, I think I'll just help myself, they can. Now, that is probably a far stretch of what they intend or maybe intend to use it for. But if the legislation isn't watertight enough to stop that happening, that is overreach by our authorities, our governments, So Saturn in Aries, the first house of Australia, could be doing all sorts of crazy, horrible things. So is that your dad?
My father, yes.
Hi, Dad.
Yes.
That's lovely. Yes, so
Yes, yes.
I'm concerned for the next few years for Australia, and given
I'm
what's
concerned for the
happened.
world, Ksenia.
Yes.
And if in the past they would really confiscate people's lands, and they did it, the communism did it. You
Mm.
know, later on we got them back with the democracy, but democracy for some reason comes from demon
Yeah,
democracy.
it's not
Uh,
what it's purported to be,
it's
democracy.
yes, yes.
No, no, but
So
yes,
if they did it historically, they can do it again,
yes,
unfortunately.
that's right. And we were talking before about how Saturn Neptune is linked to communism, and here it is in the conjunction in the first house of Australia's chart. Doesn't fill me with confidence, but as we've rightly said, our souls have decided to incarnate in this time, in this place, for whatever reason. We'll just do the best we
Yeah, just say it to God, thank you for this incarnation. Sometimes I do.
can.
Feels right.
I love your spiritual perspective, Krasi. It's always uplifting.
Thank
It really is.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you,
Yeah,
Kesenia.
yeah. And
Okay.
we can really look forward to the Saturn Jupiter trine, which could bring some reprieve.
It will. It will. It will bring.
Mm,
That's for sure. It will bring relief. So this it's not forever the difficult timing, but we have to go through it.
yes, exactly. No,
Okay.
I'm looking forward to Saturn Jupiter. I've got that in my natal chart actually. So I have the Saturn Jupiter or Jupiter Saturn closing trine in my chart, and
Oh, wonderful.
very grateful for that energy to be there. I think it'll be good for the planet.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you for the conversation, Ksenia. It was a pleasure.
As always, Krasi, it's just lovely to connect and to talk freely. It really is lovely to talk freely because sometimes
Sure.
when you interview people, when you talk with people, you have to be cautious about what you're saying. But I feel
We can't
have a chat.
otherwise. Doesn't it? We can't otherwise. It just
Yeah,
doesn't
I
work.
never want to be offensive, Libra moon, but it's just so easy to be free and honest with you, knowing that we're on the same page. So thank you, Krasi. It's
Totally.
always an honor.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for watching us. All the best.
Thank you.